Somebody asked me about privacy on a moderate impact system. So they said if a system has moderate categorization and is positive on the PTA, privacy threshold analysis, would you select all the moderate controls as well as the privacy controls? So let me put this all in context. So what they're saying is, if I'm understanding this correctly, is a moderate level system. So what does that even mean? Moderate level system means that you have three different levels in risk management framework NIST 800. You have three different levels of security. So you have a low impact system, meaning if the system was compromised, if it went down, the impact to the organization is low, meaning they could recover in a few days or whatever. That would be like a website where you're giving out publicly available information. A high impact system, a high category system would be a system like you have classified information, you have secret, top secret classified information, proprietary, and if it got out, it could close down the whole business and make everybody lose their jobs. It destroy the reputation of you or the country or even the industry that you're in. It could make you lose millions or billions of dollars if the information got out or if the system went down for a significant amount of time. You'd have to get it up very quickly in order to recover fast. That's high impact. High impact and categorization has everything to do with the level of impact that it has to the organization. If you would lose the information or if the information got corrupt or if it was suddenly unavailable. Moderate is somewhere in between. It's in between. We can get the system back up and we have a catastrophic failure and everything is gone. Like, so think about moderate in between those two goalposts. So think about a system, to give you an example, would be like a payment system. Like a payment system would be moderate because it's not the end of the world, but also it's not like we can't just throw up our hands and say, okay, we got to get it up in a few days, in a week. We got to make sure we get it up. No, you got to get it up probably within the next 24 hours because that system people need to get paid, but you got a little bit of time, so that's a moderate system. So they're saying if we had a system that was moderate categorization and we had a positive PTA, what they mean is if we had PII. PII stands for personally identifiable information. That's your private information. That's your social security number. It might be your first name and last name in conjunction with your date of birth. It might be where you live, your actual address in conjunction with your first name, last name, right? So there's some systems that have to have our personally identifiable information in there. And of course, that is, you have to protect that information. Otherwise, you have these data leaks where people can steal your information and your credit card information and then go, run up your credit cards or pretend to be you, identity theft, whatever. So it's important that we do what's called a PTA, or privacy threshold analysis, on these systems. As cybersecurity people, we have to make sure that whatever system we have, does it have sensitive information? And sensitive information, PII, personally identifiable information, your private information is considered sensitive. So we have to make sure any system that has that has special protections on it so that our data is not compromised. So a PTA is how you would figure out whether or not that system has privately identifiable information. Let me give you an example of some of the other tools that we use as cybersecurity people. So Department of Homeland Security has a really good breakdown of this. I use this all the time to explain this. So that you do a privacy threshold analysis, and that's just to make sure, okay, does this system have privacy? Because not all systems have private information on them, PII on them. So, some cases we still protect them, but they don't have PII. If it has PII, then we do something called a privacy impact assessment, where we're going deeper. We're saying, okay, we've identified that it has PII. What types of PII does it have on it? And what actual systems will house this data? What systems will store that data? And how can we protect those individual servers or workstations or whatever that have that PII? So these are the two main things that we do as cybersecurity people. And so let's put this all together here. So his question is saying, I have a moderate system, let's say a payment system, and I know that it has PII on it. It has, say, account information, and it has username, your first name and last name, and maybe date of birth on there. Would I select all the moderate controls as well as privacy controls? Let's explore that. So whenever we have a moderate control, a system has a moderate level of impact, now we got to determine what controls go on that system. So to determine what level of controls go on that system, we could go to something like this. This framework is known as the NIST 853. And what they've done here for us is break down each one of the control families by impact levels. So if we had a low impact system, like our example of a website, that's a low impact system. So it would have these controls. If I click this, it's going to take me to a set of controls that are going to be different from, say, a high impact system. Like we talked about that system, if it goes down, it's classified information. We could lose our reputation and the reputation of the country and billions of dollars, and maybe even people will die. It's a high impact system. There's systems like that. So we're at a moderate. So let's go to moderate. All of these have a different number of controls, and you can see them here. You got low impact, moderate impact, and high impact. And this is how we know what levels of control. And obviously, a high impact system is going to have way more controls on it. It's way harder to manage. There's way more stuff you got to put to secure that system. There's just lots and lots and lots of more stuff on a high impact system. Whereas a low impact system, you can see there's some holes in here. It doesn't have you don't have to put all the controls in there. You don't even have to consider some of the controls. Moderate, somewhere in between. As you can see, it doesn't have as many as high impact, but it's up there. It's much more than your low impact system. So that said, they want to focus on privacy. So how do we know which privacy controls to put on there for NIST 800? Now, there's other control frameworks rather that you would be a little bit different. Like CIS controls is going to treat privacy differently. It's going to be a little bit different with 27001. It's going to be a little bit different for PCI compliance for credit card information. So we're talking about NIST 800 controls. This is for federal information systems that are handling federal data and federal information. Now, some organizations all over the world, private organizations, do use NIST 853. They use it as a reference. It's very robust. It's very useful. But for the purposes of our example, we're talking about a federal system. So that being said, let's look at this. So on this site, they have a way for you to look at privacy baseline controls. And what I want you to do is notice something here. They don't really separate privacy in a different, it's not like putting a different bucket anymore. It's really using the same sets of controls. So you can see that. Let me just give you a specific example. Let's take one control. Let's take this one right here. This control right here is to make sure that access controls are put on the systems within your organization. Access control, and specifically they're talking about for AC-1, they're saying your organization must have a policy and procedures, something written down saying that organization X will have this level of access controls on all of our systems. We logically make sure that everybody locks their systems down when they take their cards out of their, we use a PIV card, and when you take your PIV card out, it locks the system, right? Maybe that's one of the controls. What they're saying in AC1 is that you have to have that documented. You have to have a policy in place and a procedure of how that's done. And this is one of the controls. Now, there's more specific controls that tell you things like you have to have training records, you have to have audit logs turned on. These are all controls. But let's focus on this one so we can just focus on privacy. So this one, this policy is saying that AC1 policy and procedures for access controls needs to also talk about privacy. Privacy is a part of that. So if you think about it, whenever you do access control, you have to kind of know user names. Like you have to have when the user logs in, they have a username that's attached, that might be attached to something that's in their account. Like let's say it might have their private number or in their email in there that's attached to their username, and it's attached to them authenticating into the system. And so we have to consider, how do we protect the controls, the privacy of each one of our users in the policies and procedures. And then one of the ways what we might do that is to make sure that the we don't put certain things in there. Maybe what we do is document that we don't ever put social security numbers inside of a person's profile. Maybe we put that we don't ever put a person's private phone number in there. We only put their work number. You're only allowed to put you have to put their first name and last name, but that's as far as we go. Everything else is work related. So that maybe in the policy, in the AC1 policy and our access control policy, we say, whenever you make an account, you cannot put private personal information in there. You can't put their actual address. You can't put their date of birth. It has to be all work related. And maybe we put something else. Like if you have to put their date of birth, it's made so that it's in an encrypted file or something. I don't. That's just one of the things that you could do in the policy. And so throughout this document, throughout all the controls, the way you would handle it is privacy is considered throughout all of these controls. There's not many families that are not going to have some relationship to us considering PII. The way you want to think about it is that in the NIST 853 controls is that PII is no different from sensitive information. If you are protecting classified information, secret information, there's certain words in the Department of Defense, for example, that you just don't say. Like there's certain programs that have a name that you are not even allowed to put it in an email. Like it might be called, and this is off the top of my head, this is something I'm completely making up. So Alpha 12 or something. And Alpha 12 is related to some secret program that the military has to protect against submarine detection or something from adversaries. I don't know. I'm just making this off the top of my head. But that name, that special category is, you can't even put that email. You can't even put that in an email or in a text message. The name of the program is classified itself. So Alpha 12 is classified, and you cannot even put that anywhere. If you're going to refer to it, you literally have to go to a separate network and talk to people on a separate network, a secret network. So PII is kind of treated like that, where we are protecting PII to where we might not even mention people's social security numbers. We might not even, and if you do, you have to encrypt it. You're treating it just like you would treat sensitive information. Now, sensitive information, of course, it has different levels to it. There's different levels. Like top secret is going to be treated way more crazy secure than a secret, and then secret is going to be treated way more ridiculous than PII. But PII is still protected because we want to protect our resources, our people, the employees, the contractors, and all the people, all the stakeholders who are involved with the system. We want to protect their private information so that they're not attacked online, or they're not outed. They're not their home is not doxxed or something like that. So think of it, if you think of it like that, it makes it way easier to deal with. So you're not trying to put PII in a separate bucket. You're treating it just like you treat any kind of sensitive information. And if you think of it that way, then you won't try to like put it in a separate bucket from like we used to have to do. So in the past, in the old NIST 853, you kind of had this whole other set. It was like Appendix J, and you had this other set of controls you had to implement. But it's in the new system, the way they treat it now in NIST 853 Rev 4, you don't put it in a separate bucket. It's all included. Rev 5. They've included, okay, no, sorry, it's revision 5. So in revision 5 of NIST 853, they've implemented privacy throughout the document, And the only place that is kind of specialized is when you have a special case, which is called PT controls. Let me show you those real quick. PT controls are for if you have like a website or something that's publicly available. And I'll just give you one example, like consent. So consent is so that if you had a website and you had, say, users from the public going to, let's say, I don't know, disa.public.mil, and there was a place where they could upload their first name and last name, and they want to sign up for a job or they want to sign up for training or something like that, you have to put consent. You'd have to tell them a pop-up would, I'm sure you've seen this before. A pop-up comes up and says, we're going to collect your cookies. Do you consent to having your cookies downloaded for us to upload cookies to your computers or whatever the case may be? They're just basically being transparent with you to say that, hey, we're going to collect your information. Are you okay with that? And you can say, okay. You see this a lot on European sites because GDRP, which is a general protection standard from the EU. I don't remember the name of this. I apologize. I'm not a GDRP person, but basically it's a privacy and security standard for the EU. And if ever you go to an EU site, specifically government sites, you'll see that pop up come up and say, hey, we're going to collect your information. Are you okay with this? And you have to hit yes to consent to that. So most government sites, if they collect your information, they will, even in the US, they'll have that pop-up come up and say, hey, do you consent to this? And if you say, okay, then they'll download cookies. They'll, it's explained in there what they're going to do with their information. So it's about transparency. So that's one of the places that you would have like a specialized privacy PII control. And there's a few, let me see if I can show you all the PT controls here. And these, you're not always going to use these. You can see these are mostly for like websites. Like you got one for consent. You got one for privacy notification. If you've ever gone to a site and it says, hey, by the way, we're going to protect your privacy. We're not going to sell your stuff to other people. It'll say stuff like that. If you read that, most people just say, okay, and then they go into the website. But these PT controls are specifically for if they're collecting information, they're collecting PII. And as you know, sometimes you have an internal website for an organization and they still are using PII, but it's not publicly available. So it's kind of a different situation. Like you might have an internal database where it's collecting employees' information. It's not going to go outside of the organization. It's staying within, and they use it for like training or something like that. And they'll probably have a notice that pops up or whatever. But if they don't, there's still privacy stuff that we have to do as cybersecurity people so that server is protected because it has PII. We have to be aware that, okay, this has sensitive information on it. We got to make sure that there's certain things that are put in place. Like it might have to have encrypted data that's stored there. It might have to have encrypted data if it's in transit. There's just certain things that we have to be mindful of because it's a PII system. So that's about it for that one. I hope that answers the question. We kind of went crazy on privacy stuff. It's just I don't get these questions very often about privacy, but when I do, I feel like I should explain the NIST 800 and explain that, like the NIST 853, that's one of the big changes that happened from revision 4, is that privacy is integrated throughout the entire framework. So that's it for this one, guys. I will catch you guys on the next one. If you're interested in joining and getting more training like this, I give all kinds of stuff like this all the time. In fact, I got stuff on my site for free for downloadables, and I've got paid courses that go way deeper and have downloadables and all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that, go to ConvoCourses.com.